Always great catching up with my next guest, Kenny Florian, Mr. PFL, here to talk all about the playoffs and many other things. Kenny, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
No complaints. Happy to be talking to you this morning. We got the PFL 7 card coming up. We got the playoffs right around the corner. Things are really happening. Just kind of looking back at the season for you, what have been some of the surprises, some of the highlights for you, kind of looking back on where we've gone from the season to the playoffs?
Yeah, there's been some great highlights, and it's been a long season already. But I would say, pretty easy, just based on the upset that was Jesus Pinedo beating Brendan Loughnane, who I believe and still believe is one of the best 145 pounders in the world. And Jesus Pinedo was telling everybody, people are sleeping on me. I'm going to go out there and upset Brendan Loughnane. I'm going to get to the playoffs, and I'm going to win. I'm going to surprise everybody. He did exactly that. And Brendan Loughnane has so many skills. He has excellent killer instinct. Was very focused throughout, coming off, of course, being a champion last year. So he was a clear favorite heading into that one. And to see him get beat in the manner in which he lost was very surprising. My jaw dropped. I was super happy for Jesus Pinedo, but it's also a reminder for everybody that just having 4 fights in 8 months is a real struggle. Winning 4 fights in 8 months is just an absolute beast. And it's very difficult to manage all the injuries, to manage the training camp, to manage the weight cuts and everything that goes with it. It's very, very difficult. And Jesus Pinedo showed up, and Brendan Loughnane, lost, and it's that simple.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about the format too. You can have situations like a guy that, like you said, Pinedo, no one really expected a ton, and here he is headlining this card on PFL 7 opposite Bubba Jenkins. Kind of having a quick glance at that card. We've got Impa on there. We've got Josh Silveira, Ty Flores. What for you sort of stands out? What's some of the matchups that you're really excited for in that card?
There's some great ones, but I guess I'm probably biased to the featherweights because I compete in that division. But I also believe that the featherweight division across the world in all organizations is probably one of the most competitive in the world, and I think it's the same here with the PFL. So both matchups are phenomenal. But I think Jesus Pinedo against Bubba Jenkins is a fascinating matchup. Bubba Jenkins, of course, coming from that high-level wrestling pedigree, has shown great improvements with his striking, great improvements overall. He would get to certain positions and really didn't know how to finish from there. Now he has finishing ability when he does take the back, when he does get position with his ground and pound. So, and he's got great power on the feet as well. So I think he's firing on all cylinders right now. It's the best I've seen him, the most focused I've seen him. But he's taking on a very focused man, and Jesus Pinedo is coming off a huge win, who's coming in with a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum, who's well-rounded everywhere, good everywhere. So, curious to see how that one goes down. I think that's going to be a barn burner.
And one thing that's interesting, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. Obviously, Movlid out of the playoffs. Chris Wade enters in, and there's some bad blood between Wade and Bubba Jenkins, who I just mentioned there. How interesting is that sort of storyline as far as keeping tabs on it going into the playoffs?
Yeah, they do not like each other at all, and they may face each other in the final if both get through. I think Chris Wade has a very tough matchup in Gabriel Braga, but Chris Wade has new life here, and I don't think he's going to let this opportunity pass him by. He's not going to go away easily anyway. Let's put it that way. Gabriel Braga, fantastic everywhere. But Chris Wade certainly wants to be a world champion. That's his main goal, and he's been very focused on that. Had some bad luck in previous seasons, but always comes back stronger. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for him to perhaps get into the final yet again.
So the PFL playoffs, I talked about that. Some big PFL news, obviously, a few weeks ago. Francis Ngannou is now going to be boxing Tyson Fury. Just how surprised were you that he got this fight? Because I think for a lot of us, we were kind of waiting to see if it was going to happen, and it did happen, and Francis has secured this mega fight in boxing.
With everything Francis Ngannou has done over the course of his life, we shouldn't be surprised by anything this guy's able to accomplish. Yeah. He is a powerful force in every aspect, like whether like physically, the things that he puts out there, what he wills to happen actually happens. And a lot of people underestimated that. They think that's never going to happen. He's never going to get what he wants. I think what it indicates is that for fighters that have put themselves in a certain position, right, whether it's being a champion of the sport or having a certain amount of power and a certain amount of choice, you can make things happen. If you stick to your guns, if you have the right people around you, you can create opportunities for yourself outside of the UFC. And I think it's a great reminder for people. And I think it's a great time to be a mixed martial arts fighter, professional fighter. It's a great time to be a mixed martial arts fan. So For Francis Ngannou, he reminds us of that, and to not be underestimated. Now, he certainly has a huge mountain to climb in fighting someone like a Tyson Fury, right? I mean, there's a lot of people with a lot of power that have tried to take out Tyson Fury, and many have tried, many have failed. Francis Ngannou, I think, has probably a much better opportunity to defeat Tyson Fury than Conor McGregor did against Floyd Mayweather. But it's going to be very, very, very difficult. Not only is Tyson Fury absolutely massive, but he's a fantastic boxer. I mean, the way that he moves, he's very light on his feet. He's very loose with what he does, very intelligent, knows how to adjust and adapt, and has, of course, so much experience in boxing alone. So I don't think you should underestimate Francis Ngannou with that kind of power and speed. However, this is not his singular domain, and but I think he has my curiosity. I'm very curious to see how it goes, and I will certainly buy and watch that fight.
You're involved in the industry very heavily. You talk to fighters. Do you kind of sense a shift now? Because I mean, it's one thing to bring over some of the free agents that PFL has brought over in the past, but to have a guy like Francis, who again is doing all these things, we know that his opponent will be getting $2 million when they fight. Like, are you noticing more of a shift of fighters saying, "Hey, look, I want to come over to PFL and make some money too"?
I have. I've talked to a lot of fighters personally who are very curious, about going over to the PFL because I think, first of all, not everyone can be a world champion, right? I think it's extremely difficult, no matter what organization. And I think that when you're looking at your fight career, what you have to probably look at most is going, and just like any business, how can I make the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time? You're not out there, raking leaves. You're not out there, reviewing contracts. You are fighting in a cage. You are preparing every single day, destroying your body in preparation for this thing. So how long do you want to be doing that? And I think if you realize that, hey, you're telling me in under 12 months, in 8 months, I could potentially win $1 million. You could be fighting for several years in the UFC and never make $1 million total, cumulative. So I think it's going to get people to really start scratching their heads and thinking, where should I actually be? And what are the opportunities outside of the UFC? And certainly UFC is still elite. They're the biggest and best promotion right now in the world for a reason. But the PFL, I think, is slowly closing that gap and will continue to do so. And the UFC being first to the market has had a huge advantage. They have a massive roster of fantastic fighters, but I think there's room for other organizations to do well and show that they can also attract top tier talent in the world.
I don't think it was a coincidence either when the Francis news dropped with Tyson Fury. We got all these UFC announcements as well, and one of them was obviously the Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira rematch. Do you think the fight will go any differently? I mean, Charles obviously really great win over Beneil Dariush in his last fight, but Islam really had his number in that first fight. What do you make of the rematch in Abu Dhabi?
I do think it's a very difficult matchup for Charles Oliveira. He claims that he just didn't show up. He wasn't himself that night. That could very well be possible. But I do think Charles Oliveira defensively has always struggled. I think offensively he's a marvel. One of the most dangerous offensive fighters that I have seen compete. However, defensively he's always shown vulnerabilities, and I think that's what Islam was able to expose there a little bit. He opens himself up to shots and submissions and positions that I think for a guy who's that elite probably shouldn't expose himself in that way. So I think if he's able to shore up himself defensively and not make some of those same mistakes, I think he could do significantly better. Perhaps he can even win. But if I were to look at both of their styles and how they match up against each other, Islam is going to be another big favorite for a reason. I think he's just so solid everywhere. And Islam, in contrast to Charles Oliveira, isn't one of those guys that makes a whole lot of mistakes. So I'm curious to see it happens, but it's what makes it such an interesting matchup, because Charles Oliveira offensively is so phenomenal and so dangerous and so potent, but he's going against a guy in Islam Makhachev who just doesn't offer up a whole lot of opportunities for victory.
Would you give Islam the edge in that rematch just because of the history and, like you mentioned, not making a lot of mistakes?
No question about it. I think due to his wrestling ability, his ability to avoid submissions, and his improving striking, for sure, Islam would be my pick at this stage of the game.
The other fight they announced was Khamzat Chiamev and Paulo Costa. What do you make about Khamzat fighting a ranked opponent at middleweight now? Obviously he did well at welterweight, but middleweight's a different division. You're a guy who's fought in multiple weight classes. I'm sure you know that more better than everyone.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's fascinating seeing Khamzat and Paulo Costa get matched up. This is the fight that I wanted. This is the fight that I would like to see. and I think Paulo Costa is crazy enough to believe that he can win that fight, and then maybe he could even out wrestle Khamzat. I don't know if he can. I don't think he can, but it's possible. I think Paulo Costa is physically very impressive. He's very strong. He has a good ability to get back to his feet. I think he has to understand that those skills are going to have to be sharp for that fight against Khamzat. And again, Khamzat, I think, is most dangerous at 170 pounds. Now, he has a tough weight cut there, and I don't think he's going to be short on power necessarily at 185 pounds, but it's a big jump up. These guys are very big. Paulo Costa is one of those guys. He's very experienced in that division. But if Khamzat is able to dominate someone like Paulo Costa, he has an opportunity, and I think a huge opportunity to get a title shot after that one, if he's able to do that. So it's just unclear where Khamzat wants to be. Is he a welterweight? Is he a middleweight? And if there's one guy who can match up well against someone like Israel Adesanya, it's someone who knows how to wrestle and who has the ground and pound and positioning of someone like a Khamzat Chiamev. So that's why I think it's such a huge opportunity for him against Paulo Costa. And if he shows up and is dominant, he could be the next title contender.
And same sort of deal. Do you think Chiamev would have the edge just because of the style matchup, or Costa because he's sort of the mainstay at 85?
Yeah, I think Chiamev is more consistent. For that reason, I think he's got the advantage for sure against Costa.
This weekend, we have the BMF title on the line. I was curious what you make of that, because I think there's some people who are like, yeah, this is really cool, but others are like, why do we need to make a title just because it's on a pay-per-view? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I was discussing this on the Anakin Florian podcast the other day, and I'm not a fan of the BMF belt. It's an amazing fight. Let's just leave it at that. The reason is this, right? It's like, these are things that are completely arbitrary and subjective, right? It's like, are we saying that other people in the UFC aren't bad mother effers? Or is that what we're saying?
I know, yeah.
Just these two are the only BMF guys in the division. None of them exist outside of 155. None of them exist in other elite division. Let's just say it's an amazing fight. We don't need a belt, but perhaps we do. We need this belt in order to. I don't like those gimmicky things myself. I'm just not a huge fan of those things. But every promotion is going to do things differently, and if I guess they must see a difference. If there's a belt on the line as to not when they're promoting a pay-per-view main event, that it obviously affects pay-per-view buy. So what the heck do I know? They're the ones in control of the business, and if that helps them bring in more views, then all power to them. Cool, I have no problem with that. But I'm just not fooled by the marketing of it. Everyone in the UFC, everyone at an elite level in a mixed martial arts promotion is a bad mother effer, and you don't need a belt to prove it, because I don't know, that can go to anybody. It's like, are we saying other elite guys in their divisions aren't bad? Anyways, so yeah, great fight. I'm looking forward to the fight itself, but not a big fan of this BMF belt.
Jon Jones sort of hinted about retiring after fighting Stipe for the heavyweight title on the New York card, but now Tom Aspinall gets a big win on the weekend, and that sort of opened things up. Do you think Jon will stick to that, or do you think we could see him fight Aspinall?
It depends. Jon Jones has done very well for himself. I don't think he needs to fight at this stage of the game. So from a financial perspective, that could very well be true. And that's going to be a huge motivating factor for any fighter. If you no longer need to fight, you don't need to make money anymore, and you're set for life and your kids are set for life, then you're probably not going to do that anymore. To stay in the fight game, you need to be motivated. You need to be hungry. And when you are aware of that sense of loss of that, then you probably need to stop. This game's way too dangerous for that. And I think with Jon Jones, his legacy, his mixed martial arts career, his wins and losses, those things are extremely important to him. And I think for him to really, he's got that loss against Matt Hamill, right? But he's
not really a loss, though. You know what I mean?
It's not really a loss, right? He's an undefeated fighter as far as we're all concerned. And I think that he wants to keep that intact. And I wouldn't have a problem with that. Jon Jones has done everything you can in this sport, 2-division champion, to have that pristine record and to defeat another elite heavyweight GOAT, potentially in Stipe Miocic. I think that's where he probably sees, all right, I've done it all. Take it easy. Have a good one. So I think there's some credence to that. I could see that happen.
Someone you trained with in the past, George St. Pierre, going to be coming back and taking a grappling match. We heard some rumblings last week, maybe Damian Maia, but who would you like to see him grapple in his return?
Yeah, I also heard the name Nick Diaz thrown around. That would be
Ooh,
extremely interesting as well. Either of those matches are very intriguing to me. George St. Pierre has stayed training throughout. He is an absolute professional and a true martial artist. So I think he's going to be sharp. And someone like a Damian Maya would be really interesting. Obviously Damian is at the end of his career. He's older, but truly a jiu-jitsu specialist. So that would be a fascinating fight for me as well, not a fight, a match. I should be more specific. It's not a fight, but as a jiu-jitsu fan myself and a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I would love to see that one. I'm really curious to see how that one goes. George St. Pierre has been working out with the Danaher crew, of course, down in Austin, Texas. Been going out there training course with Faraz Sahabi and the guys in Montreal. And at H2O in Montreal. So he's staying busy, staying active, always learning, always getting better. So that would be an awesome matchup, him and Damian Maya. And I'm a huge fan of Damian Maya as well. Those are two of the most respectful and technical martial artists that I've witnessed compete. So congratulations if that's the match, and best of luck to both of those guys.
okay, we're gonna have some fun before we get out of here. I'm gonna say some rapid fire questions, just whatever comes to mind first. Tell me whatever answer comes into your head. Who's the best striker in MMA right now?
Israel Adesanya.
Okay, best grappler.
Ryan Hall.
Love it. Funniest fighter.
Funniest fighter. Paulo Costa on Twitter is absolutely hysterical.
Okay, who would you want to have dinner with?
Alexander Volkanovski.
Who would you want by your side in a street fight?
Mike Perry.
Love it. Highest fight IQ, in your opinion?
Alexander Volkanovski.
And what's a dream fight you want to see?
Well, how about this? Obviously we saw the Volkanovski Islam Makhachev fight. What about a Volkanovski Charles Oliveira fight? That'd be interesting.
There we go. Excellent answer. You saved the best for last. Kenny, thanks so much for doing this. I know you got to go. Appreciate the time. Anik and Florian podcast. Letting everyone know where they can get a hold of you and everything else.
Thanks so much, man. You can check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel for the full episode of Anik and Florian podcast. We have clips on our YouTube channel, Anik and Florian podcast. You can check us out there. And you can check me out on social media at Kenny Florian. If you have any questions or want to hear me talk about something. And you can head over to KennyFlorianMartialArts.com if you're interested in learning about jiu-jitsu. So that's it, man. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.